Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms around the United Kingdom and throughout the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. Thanks for tuning in. We have got a fantastic guest coming up at 7:30 at the bottom of the hour. It's none other than David Clews of Unity News Network of UNN. David Clews has been on the show before. He is a great chap. He's got a lot of interesting things to say, and he's always fantastic entertainment. So please do stick around for David at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be having a chat with him for 25 minutes or so. And do send in your comments and your questions for David as well. And I know some of you already know David personally, and you know that he is a great guy and a fantastic political enthusiast, and a great unionist, obviously, as well, and we're delighted to have him on. Good stuff. So let's say hello to some people right now. Now, the first in this evening was Derek, who says hello to fellow unionists around the world. I can't believe that Useless is in London meeting the King. How hypocritical. Good evening to Debbie and to TC, and hi to Mally and to Catherine and to Harry from the sunny West Sussex County. Hope you're all well. Things are good in the office here, as they always are, Harry. Hope things are well in the great British county of West Sussex. Hello to D. Stanners and to Derek and to Stuart from Elgin, and to Adam from the great British state of England, more specifically Leicestershire. Hello to Paul from the Garden of England, known as Kent, and to Kat, hi. Apparently, Adam says the Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy PM. Who's the Deputy PM these days? They change so fast, I'm not sure. Made a mistake by saying that the SNP have been in power for 13 years when it's actually 16 years. Well, it feels like 26 years, quite frankly, Adam. It really does. Christopher says the best people are unionists. Adam's already got the coronation badge. Good for you. It's a wee cracker. Alan says, good evening, hope it's a great show. As always, it will be. Catch up on YouTube later because work has to come first. I know what you mean, Alan. Well, you know, I just want to talk here about, I've had a busy day reading the National because it's difficult. I buy the National so that you don't have to, and I read it so that you definitely don't have to, but I have to because it's my job. And it's a tough read, it really is, because you have to wade through so many just untruths, sometimes just obvious lies, and from people who should know better. Okay, so just as a for instance of complete misconstructions and lies, this is Joanna Cherry, who, as well as getting paid a lot of money to be a King's Counsel and a member of the Scottish Divisive Party, she also gets paid to write in the National. Can you believe it? Sometimes when things are going well for people, like everything happens for them, like, and still they complain. Anyway, she's written this load of drivel here about self-determination. See, I don't have time for this drivel anymore, really, because it's such utter drivel. Anyway, she says here, and this has to be called out, Our sovereignty means that we as Scots have the right to self-determination. Well, obviously we have. Obviously we have, and we exercise that every time we go to the polls, whether that's local elections, Scottish elections, or British national elections. So she's not saying anything that's not true, but she's trying to pretend like we don't have it. And I've spoken about this before, because when they talk about self-determination, our right to self-determination, what they mean is not our right to vote. What they mean is our right to be independent. That's what they mean. Okay, they use the word self-determination, but they actually mean independence. Anyway, let's indulge her self-determination thing here. Like all other human rights, the right to self-determination is a universal right. Okay, yeah. It is most definitely not one from which the Scots are uniquely excluded, whatever the UK Supreme Court might have said. What? You're saying, as a QC, you're misrepresenting the Supreme Court decision. You're suggesting, well, you're basically saying that the UK Supreme Court has ruled that the Scots don't have a right to self-determination. Okay, what did the Supreme Court rule? The Supreme Court ruled on the 23rd of November 2022 that Holyrood did not have the legislative competence to pass a referendum bill, as the matter is reserved to the UK government, because it relates to the Constitution of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. The Supreme Court did not rule that the Scots don't have a right to self-determination. But you see, this woman, who, like the rest of these people, gets on the telly, the Scottish media indulge her, and she promotes basically a lie, which is unacceptable behaviour for a politician, quite frankly. And so that got my goat when I read that, because lots of people don't understand what happened last November. Lots of people don't remember what happened yesterday, let alone anything involving the Constitution and the Supreme Court back in November 2022. So Joanna Cherry can say these things knowing that people will never properly call her out on it. Well, at least we here at A Force for Good have the ability to do that thanks to the wonders of modern technology. And so we're calling out people like that when they say rubbish like that. Unacceptable to misrepresent the Supreme Court judgment in that way. For a KC to do that is unacceptable. Okay, rant about her over. Here's the next rant as I'm ploughing through this interminable rot, which is the material that is published in the National. There is one good journalist who writes a history article every Tuesday, which I read and learn stuff from, but the rest of it is just interminable rot. Here we've got some woman I've never heard of before called Kelly Given, and apparently she's written this big whole article, which personally I don't believe she's written it, because I can't believe that this person would be able to write an article. Maybe I'm wrong, okay, maybe I'm prejudiced, but I cannot believe that person actually wrote all this stuff. Okay, and if she did, then she should be thoroughly ashamed of herself. Anyway, it's all lies. It's having a go, of course, at the British monarchy. Oh, how corrupt Britain is and how unequal it is. And what really annoyed me was she goes that the king was holding, and I'll just quote it, they're holding the sceptre. She says, "The great star of Africa shone from Charles's sceptre, a diamond weighing more than 3,100 carats that was stolen from South Africa in 1905. And I'm thinking to myself, stolen from South Africa in 1905? That can't be right. There's no way, if it was, they'd still have it in the British sceptre front and centre. No way. So I looked up the Crown Jewels and Coronation Ceremony, which is a guide here in our office. The Great Star of Africa. The Star of Africa, and I'm quoting here from this booklet, is the only great gem in the regalia of which the history is accurately known. It was cut from an immense diamond found in 1905 by Mr. Frederick Wells, manager of the De Beers Premier Mine in South Africa. Walking through the mine, he saw what he thought to be a piece of crystal. He dug it out with his walking stick, etc., etc. He immediately took it to Sir Thomas Cullinan, president of De Beers. It did indeed prove to be the largest diamond ever found, an unbelievable 3,106 carats. It was named the Cullinan diamond after Sir Thomas Cullinan, the president of De Beers, and it was then presented to King Edward VII on his birthday in 1907 by the Transvaal government, with the request that it should be set in the crown of the United Kingdom. So, in other words, it was a diamond that was found at the De Beers diamond mine. De Beers, of course, being the most famous diamond miners in the world, a big South African company. So it was found in the mine, property of the De Beers company, and the president of De Beers gave it as a gift to the King of the UK. And this lying person has said it was stolen from Africa in 1905. Now, this person gets on the telly. This person gets to give us her misconsidered lying opinion and gets paid to write articles in this trash, which are utter lies. This is Scotland in the modern day, you know. It really, really gets my goat. They're just sheer lies. Now, you see, like, I know that I read this stuff and I'm protected because we have an amazing library of stuff here and I know how to research things. So when I read something that can't be right, I can check it. I can literally check it. But almost everybody does not have that ability. And so people just read it and they go, the king was wearing a crown and the centrepiece is a stolen diamond? That's how people react, because they don't know any better. And she knows that, or whoever wrote this article for her knows that. And so they know they can just lie. There's so much lying going on. It's beyond belief, especially in the field of Scottish nationalism. And here's another one as well. And this is all from the National in just a 2 or 3 day period. Somebody from Alba taken issue with the Stone of Destiny still being in London. It hasn't been returned yet. And this person, who is it that's speaking here? Somebody called Denise Findlay says that the Scottish constitutional tradition has a history that Scotland's kings swore an oath of allegiance to the people. And I'm like, I'm not sure that they did. I've never read anything about a Scottish oath that swears its allegiance directly to the people. I've been reading 2 big articles this week on the Charles II's coronation at Scone, which are extremely interesting. And that was like 100% Presbyterian. 100% Presbyterian. And he had to sign, Charles II had to sign an oath to basically Presbyterianism and Protestantism. This idea that they was going to swear an oath to the people as such, I mean, I can't say for sure, but I've never read that. All I've ever read is that they swear usually to the church in some way, to the religion, as it were, and to uphold the religion. But remember, the last coronation in Scotland was Charles II, just shortly after his father had been cruelly executed. So I'm going to do much more research into this, the Scottish coronation oaths, because it is actually very, very interesting stuff. And unfortunately, we don't have that much information going back. One of the reasons why the English coronation ceremony has tended to overshadow the Scottish one is that there's much more known about the English monarchs going right back, much more known and recorded in history about what happened in their coronation ceremonies than there is going back into the Scottish past. But we're going to find out as much as we can, and we'll bring that out as much as we can in the next issue of Union Heart, which is going to have 2 or 3 pages on the Scottish tradition. Something interesting about the Charles II one was that the people in charge of the coronation did not anoint him with holy oil because they thought that was a quote-unquote papish thing to do, so they didn't do that. But that carryover from that tradition has stayed with the Anglican Church, but not apparently with the Scots, at least not back in middle of the 16th century. Sorry, 17th century, 1651, I think, was the coronation of Charles II, but need to check. Anyway, Stone of Destiny, and I'm always interested in the Stone of Destiny, and I'm going to read a quote that Alex Salmon made, which I thought, that's a clever quote, by the way, because people are saying, why is he always just caring about a stone? It's only a stone. No, everything is symbolic and everything is political. And Salmon quoted here, "It is a symbol and symbols are important, and politicians who don't understand the importance of history and symbolism cannot either command the present or shape the future." Close quote. That's Alex Salmon who said that, and he's 1,000% correct on that. I'm going to read it again. "It is a symbol, and symbols are important, and politicians who don't understand the importance of history and symbolism cannot either command the present or shape the future." And that's why when you have a fight about the Stone of Destiny, those who understand history and symbolism can literally command the present. Whereas and I'm talking there obviously about the SNP and the Alba people, whereas their counterparts down in London, these like Tory frontbenchers and so on, most of them probably have a hard enough job contemplating their breakfast in the morning, quite frankly, let alone putting their socks on, let alone figuring out the symbolism of the Stone of Destiny and understanding the importance of it in all our lives today. Anyway, one man who does understand the symbolism is Lord Frost. "Britain's institutions are medieval, and rightly so." And he points out about a coronation stone that sits in Kingston upon Thames, where the Anglo-Saxon kings were alleged to have been crowned in the 10th and 11th centuries. And he's pointing out there how, and I alluded to this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, how pre-1066 England tends to forget its history, just like some Scottish nationalists forget history that happened after 1296. A lot of people in England don't think right back, like it's as if history in England started with William the Conqueror, which that kind of sucks a bit because he was a conqueror. But there was Anglo-Saxon kings going right back, and the earliest one I've found that we can find anything about is Lucius, Lucius, in the 200s, who was probably the first Christian monarch that we know of in Great Britain in its entirety, but I remain to be corrected on that. So what he's doing is he's saying, we've got to go back and understand the role and relevance of all of these things and why they are important today, because they are literally what give us our national culture. And culture is such a valuable part of politics, and in fact, without culture, politics is very boring and pointless as well. Paul Hadlow says the Tories are utterly useless. They've let a lot of people down, that's for sure. And let's talk about Labour now. Remember, back in 2014, there was prior to the referendum. Back in 2014, prior to the referendum, Gordon Brown came up with this idea that he was going to promise, and I don't know why he thought he had the right to do it, but everybody indulged him. He was going to promise more powers if people voted to stay in the UK. And people like myself, well, don't do that. Don't do that, because that's simply, firstly, nobody's voting on those kind of matters. It's either separation or not. Don't muddy the waters with more powers. And all you're doing anyway is going to be giving more powers to the Scottish National Party, who will use it against you. So he called it the vow, and the editor of the Daily Record was a man called Murray Foote, who was a Scottish nationalist, and so he was delighted to hear all about the vow, and they basically, Murray Foote and Gordon Brown colluded, and they made a famous front page of the Daily Record. And they promised more powers. However, afterwards, people like ourselves were saying, no, that vow actually made no difference. All it did was give the SNP a whole raft of new powers to use against the centre. And we've been proven right, because we're always right here at A Force for Good. There's a new book's just been published analysing all the research. The vow did not win 2014 Indy Ref for the Union. And the researchers find, as we knew, that it made no substantial difference either way. Didn't get people to vote no who would have voted yes. Didn't get people to vote yes who would have voted no. It was utterly pointless, other than the fact that it ended up gifting the Scottish National Party lots of new powers, laid out a very nice bouncy bed for them to fall back on after they lost, and jump back up again, stronger indeed than ever before. Terrible strategic mistake. But of course, because it's the Labour Party, something that you have to know about the Labour Party is that it never learns ever. It never learns ever. So it's going to do the same thing again. And it's going to be the same man that's going to do it. Gordon Brown has already written the policy for Labour if it is to be elected in 2024. And guess what? Whole load of new powers. And guess what? They're selling it as strengthening the union by giving Holyrood more powers. The same rhetoric that we've been hearing all these years. And because he is going to do this, because he's like a revolutionist, he's already set a rally, as he's calling it, Brown's think tank to hold pro-union rally. And that's going to be on Thursday, the 1st of June at 7:30 in the Central Hall in Edinburgh. And that will be an absolute delight, I'm sure. And essentially what he's doing is he is grandstanding what's going to be the Labour policy if they're getting elected for Scotland, and he's starting now to try to convince people that in fact what's wrong with Holyrood is that it doesn't have enough powers to bugger up the country. And that will be his message. And he will be wrong, as always. And in a few years' time, we'll be shown, our scepticism will be shown to be 100% correct, as it always is. So that's something to miss anyway, is Brown's, what he's calling a pro-union rally. And somebody called the Welsh First Minister said, "We need a new strengthened union. A union which offers strong devolution for all parts of the UK." So beware of that, because what happens with Labour is they come in with a plan. They always have a plan. Like the Tories get elected and it's like, well, what do we do now? Well, let's just sit about and see how we can maybe make some money, or, you know, start another war or something like that. Whereas Labour come in and they've got a whole raft of things that they will do. A whole raft of things that they will do. Okay, this is what differentiates the Labour Party from the Tories, is that Labour always come in with a plan, and they do it all within 6 months. It's like, now, this is when we're doing it, so that we can just have a whole 5 years of living on what we've done. Whereas the Tories will come up with a good idea, like, let's do something to save the Union, in the dying weeks and months of its own administration. Too late. You have to go in with a plan, but the Conservatives never have a plan, because they're so diffuse in their beliefs. There's social conservatives, there's economic conservatives, there's free market conservatives, and they all kind of coalesce under this thing called conservatism. But it doesn't have a plan, it's just reactive to whatever Labour has come in and done. And it's one of the reasons why the country just kind of muddles on in the way that it does. Harry Brown says, who goes and looks at the situation of Scotland and thinks that to solve it, give the Scottish devolved Parliament more powers? Yeah, Gordon Brown does. Gordon Brown thinks that. And then the media will indulge him. And then the national newspaper will say, it's not enough powers. And so it goes on. Now, on this day in British history, the 17th of May, 1977, and the reason I'm highlighting this is one or two nice pics that you'll never have seen before. These are incredible. Found these on the internet. It was the Queen's 25th Jubilee, Silver Jubilee, 1977, and she did a tour of towns and cities throughout the UK, and she started here in the great British city of Glasgow. And let's put up the pictures that we've got there of her. That's them coming down Argyle Street with the whole household cavalry. Look at that, people on both sides as well, being drawn by that horse and buggy. Prince Philip there. That's probably on Queen Street. This is them on Queen Street. That's people down both sides. The building on the right there at the corners is a Wetherspoons, but otherwise these buildings are exactly the same as they were. And then in the evening, she went to the King's Theatre and was entertained by Sidney Devine and Dolly Parton, would you believe? And Frankie Howard, remember him? And I'll tell you an interesting thing about that picture. See that? See the window, top left there? Well, the window above that was a Force for Goods office at 268 Bath Street many years ago. Many years ago we were based there at that corner of Bath Street, directly opposite the King's Theatre. There you go. Tell us if you were at that. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring in our friend David Clews. Great stuff. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome David Clews of Unity News Network.
Alistair, good evening. How are you? Good evening to all your audience as well. Thank you so much for extending the opportunity to come on the show.
It's always a delight to have you on, David. And I was saying that at the start of the show. You know, you're very knowledgeable, and also you've got a way of communicating your knowledge in an entertaining manner as well. And you are a professional broadcaster, because Unity News Network is, well, how would you describe Unity News Network?
I actually say that we take an anarchic look at serious events. So, yeah, I mean, it is a very fine line, of course, because I by nature, I'm quite a comical person. I do like a joke and a laugh, but obviously we are dealing with very, very, very serious issues. So it's I think you have to try and do things with a smile on your face, the way that the country is these days, Alistair. But we have a joke, we have a laugh, but we also do have a serious analysis. We look at geopolitics, we look at international politics, we look at local politics as well. And It's there's just so much going on just now. There's so much happening, but there's also so little happening as well. It's a very strange situation we kind of find ourselves in.
Yeah, yes, and there's it's also looking to the future as well and thinking, oh my goodness me, where is this going to go? And if this isn't stopped, it's like the next year's general election. I mean, where on earth is that going to go as well? And it's not as if there's a choice between two completely different ways of looking at things. It's bad and worse as the choice that you can make. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but that's sometimes how it feels.
It is. I mean, I was interested that what you were talking about, the way in which Labour and we'll call it the left. You're right. They know how to wield power. The right doesn't. The right comes in and then just buckles on everything. And you saw that with Trump, the Trump presidency, where he basically did nothing for 4 years. I mean, yes, he did some stuff, but he was elected on a manifesto pledge to build a wall. He didn't build a wall. You look at the state now of the Mexican border with the USA. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. The swamp consumed him. And it's constant knee-taking, basically, from those. And what the left have done, they have successfully portrayed themselves as the good guys. And anyone that's against them is a bad person. So, and people think that. People who are small c socially conservative or people who are traditionalists, that you can see it. They're terrified, and they've managed to persuade people that Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak are heading up like a neo-fascist regime, and that like it's insane. And like they say that we've never had such an extremist Home Secretary, and they're like, no, they're not. This is the most open borders, weak Conservative government we've ever had.
That's right. Almost 1 million people are going to be coming in, or don't know if they've come in the last 12 months or if this 12-month period is scheduled to take in 1 million, but that's just utterly beyond belief. It is actually easily believable. If you live in cities, you believe it.
What you have to remember is that is 1 million net. So probably about 1.5 million people, maybe more, have come from a foreign country, and 500,000 Brits have left. And looking at it, I mean, obviously there's many angles you can look at, but fundamentally, if you have a country that is run by people from other countries who have a different religion, a different background, different cultures, then that's a foreign country. It's not overly controversial to say. And if you have your ruling elite, because I mean, obviously there's a country grounded in Christian values, and if you have people who are non-Christian or non-native to Europe or this country, the fundamental shape of the country is going to change. And people say, well, that's not true. Well, look at Scotland. Scotland underwent a massive demographic shift in the early 20th century when you had 900,000 Irish migrants. And that fundamentally altered the shape of Scotland. Scotland went from being a massive unionist country, a staunch small c conservative country, to not being one. And that was due to demographic shifts. So people can pretend it doesn't exist and pretend it's not happening, but it is happening. And it is altering the face and shape of this country. Yeah.
The idea used to be that, well, it's okay if different people from different backgrounds and creeds and cultures and so on come in, so long as they assimilate to the overwhelming cultural attitude of the nation. And I understand that, and I think that it can work, but it requires two things to be in place. One is that the numbers coming in have to be relatively low.
Yep.
But above all, the actual culture of the nation has to be very confident and very strong.
Correct.
And this is our way of doing things. And Britain has collapsed as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, whether you're Tory or Labour leaders, they couldn't define for you what is British culture and heritage at all. And to the extent that they can think about it, they would want to kind of distance themselves from it, or claim that that's something we don't want to talk about anymore because it was racist or something like that.
And what's really incredible though is the way in which the left have totally buckled on immigration, because being against mass migration was traditionally a left-wing perspective, because having a constant source of cheap labour disproportionately benefits the ruling capitalist classes. And they don't have... I mean, I played a speech the other day of Mick Lynch, and he's saying that as soon as people arrive, they should get the same rights of workers as others. I mean, again, Keir Hardie famously protested against Lithuanian miners being brought over to work. And I was down in London, and London's just a pyramid scheme that's totally reliant on a constant flow of migrants to work low-paid jobs. And there's going to come a point where these people are going to say, look, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not working 40 hours a week, living in a tiny flat somewhere. For what? And what happens then? Because that is what happens when you have mass migrants. That's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. Was they opened up the borders. Anyone could become a Roman citizen, and you had people from far-flung corners of the empire used to be enemies, and they turned around and said, well, we don't care about Rome. We're not going to fight for Rome. And it doesn't work. Like, that's my argument. This doesn't work for anybody. It really, really doesn't. And the housing situation, again, it's all primarily centred on the southeast of England. It's a crazy system. And I don't know how much longer they'll just be able to keep a lid on things. And the other thing that nobody ever talks about is so many other conflicts from abroad are imported here. You've got Hindu-Muslim tensions. You've got Jewish-Muslim tensions. You've got pro-Iranian regime protesters out fighting with anti-Iranian regime protesters. Like, I fear very much for the future, and especially in the cities. And I don't think any politician has the guts to talk about it. They do just immediately smear you as a racist, smear you as a xenophobe. And but I think that will change eventually. I think sensible people will have to come up with a way to solve this and have an argument, because it's not working. And the only reason that it's okay is because the economy's still not too bad.
Yeah. And I think that something has to change. I can't see how this can keep going on, and I can't for the life of me. Well, I was talking about this with somebody else the other day, and this person was saying to me, look, it's actually our politicians who are encouraging this. Because I was saying, look, can we not have sanctions against France? Like, say to France, look, you control that beach line, or literally we're not going to buy from you. And what that would mean is, like, France would return the favour, and they say, okay, well, we're not going to buy from you. And that's like escalating it to an international situation. But this is a national emergency.
Yes,
One of the things that's been wrong about this debate from the very beginning is that it's been framed within the concept of a human rights issue.
Correct.
The idea that, these people are escaping their homeland and they need to be protected because they're vulnerable people. They don't look vulnerable to me, but let's even go along with that. Okay, so it's a human rights issue. If you frame it in that, you're never going to be able to stop it, because you're always going to say, because there's always going to be asylum seeking till the end of time. Because till the end of time, mankind is always going to be fighting with each other. There's always going to be wars. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be environmental disasters. There's always going to be asylum until the end of time. So if you allow asylum, you're basically saying you don't have a border.
Correct.
But that's if you frame it within a human rights concept. What it actually is a national security matter. It's a national security matter. And when you change the frame that way, then the options available to you to handle it become completely different. You have a whole new toolbox to address this national security emergency. So we have a national security emergency going on.
But the Tories fundamentally don't want to do anything about it because Jeremy Hunt was talking to this today. Well, I mean, we need to make it easier for people to migrate. I mean, this is just, it's so off the charts from the reality of life for everyday people, and it is just kicking the can down the road. It is just not solving the key problem. And one of your viewers made a great point, and I talk about this frequently. I've coined the phrase the Lebanonization of Britain. And you look at Lebanon. Lebanon was a very peaceful, stable, pro-European country. Now Lebanon is a complete basket case. Inflation, hyperinflation. You have to have I can't remember the exact, I think you have to have a Maronite Christian president. You then have to have a Sunni prime minister, and then a Shia, I can't remember exactly, is it a Shia chancellor? And then you've got Druze Arabs as well, and they just basically all fall out, and it just creates chaos. And Lebanon is a good example of what could happen here eventually because of the short-termist and the fearful politics that we've had over the last few years, and it's terrible.
Yeah, we don't have any men or women in power with the necessity, with the mental attitude that is required to deal with this national emergency. I mean, whatever you may think of some of the old boys like Winston Churchill and so on, I'm sure they would have had an attitude of how to deal with this, and they wouldn't have been faffing about talking about compassion and the need to roll over and just accept the absolute transformation of your country. We've got people who, to be fair to them, Suella Braverman and that, they talk the talk, but again, they're facing the blob, which is the civil service, which is another thing that's wrong with the British political system, is the civil service has to be utterly transformed, because if you have a civil service that does not want to do what the government of the day wants to do, then the government cannot get anything done. Well, I mean, Keir Starmer will get everything just railroaded right through.
Because he's their man. And you look at Dominic Raab, I don't like Dominic Raab at all. However, the reasons he was made to resign were nonsense. And they were trying to make out he was a bully, he was trying to... that's just not true. And again, this is what they will do. They I mean, look at the Sue Gray thing. Like, she did that report on these parties, which was nonsense, and she's being tapped up to be the next lead chief exec of the Labour Party, and the Guardian and the Blob are like, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? But I think though what's interesting is Starmer is not popular. He just isn't. People don't like him. And I'm pleased about that. However, Sunak is equally unpopular and useless. But I think people do see through Starmer. I think the left of the Labour Party see Starmer for what he is. I think they see him for a sellout and a charlatan who will betray all the principles that he did supposedly have. So I think there probably will be a Labour government, but it might actually be a minority government. And we were talking earlier, Alistair, about this National Conservatism conference, and like you look at some of the sound bites coming from it, and it does look quite good. And but it's the same people who have been in charge for the last 13 years now telling you the solution to the problems that they've created. Well. And increasingly, politics is just a pantomime. And what is a pantomime? You've got a good guy and you've got a bad guy. But at the end, they all hold hands and walk up and bow in front of the audience because they're actually friends, really. And the baddie's not really a bad guy. And that's what this is. It is a pantomime. And when I talk about, and you're right what you say about the civil servants, we do need a revolution in this country. We need change. And unfortunately, I think the problem with people on our side is they still have that traditional conservative mindset that, well, if we can just shuffle the pieces... No, I think we have to be radical because the left are utterly radical. And there's a lot I don't like about Thatcher. in what she did, but she was radical, and she did what she said she would, and so did Blair. And Blair and Thatcher really have been the two most pivotal prime ministers, I think, in the post-war period. And ever since then, we've just had a managerial class of politician, and that is embodied in Starmer. So I don't know what will happen. I mean, I think there's a real chance the Tories might fall apart as a party. I think there's a chance the Labour Party might fall apart as well, which will be good because the two-party system's a joke. And I increasingly see a fracturing. You might have the left of the Labour Party goes it alone, maybe, and then you've got the chance that an Islamic party will emerge as well. I think that's probably in the horizon in the next few years, and things will change very, very quickly, I think.
Yes, I feel that it cannot go on the way that it's going on at the moment. I just have this premonition that something's going to break, as it were. If the premonition, is that the right word? I don't know. But I just feel like my head, this can't go on because just everything seems to be getting worse. You walk down the street, it's a sunny day, and, you know, the shops are full, and you think it's not. But, like, underneath the streets, on the streets, underneath, you just feel there's something not going right here. David, before you answer, I'm just going to flash out a question to the viewers for our little badge here. And
nice.
You can get that if you answer this question. Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. On this day in 1977, the Queen started her Silver Jubilee tour in which great British city? Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. But yes, and also, David, the voices that are marginalised and that are not allowed onto the television as well tells you where the power is. You know, I like GB News, but GB News will have any far left fruitcake on.
They wouldn't have me on or you on.
Spouting nonsense. And this person's attitude gets broadcast throughout the world and gets thousands and thousands of views. But they will not have people like you and I on because we're too truthful and we're too right.
I mean, that's the thing as well. Like, I am quite bombastic and hyperbolic in what I do, but I can actually also sit and have a reasonable conversation about things. Whereas, as you say, they do put, and I think a lot of that is rage bait. That it is just to wind people up and really get them going. I think that is a very successful business model that the right have realised. Like, I try and not do that now because it doesn't achieve anything. Like posting. I mean, we still do it, but it's like when, I mean, dare I say, posting a child twerking or something like that. Unfortunately, that does happen, but it is designed to provoke outrage. But it's how do we then manifest that outrage into something happening? Because we've got no power, we've got no influence, and it is a poor situation to be in. And I think the problem is people with our persuasion, our point of view, they just don't go into politics, whereas people that have gone into politics have all been campaigners, people that work for charities, people that work for third sector organisations, and that's why you're left with the basket case that is Scotland. But look at, on a positive note, look at what's happened to Sturgeon in the SNP and how quickly that has happened. You know, from basically an unassailable position 6 months ago, which she was in, formidable player, right up there, still at the top of her game, gone. And the cops out her door. And I've got maybe a slightly different opinion. I personally think the police have made a bit of a balls up of this. I think they're doing another Rangers here that I don't know. I think there's definitely been a lot of unethical behaviour by the SNP. I think they've probably broken electoral law, but have they done anything that's criminal? I mean, obviously we would say it's criminal, but based on the law that they have, is it criminal? I'm not so sure, but I think the police only did this because they knew, they sensed the power was shifting from the power that Sturgeon had, and it just shows you how quickly that can happen. And Hamza Yousaf's just there, and he's useless, and He's just being humiliated on a daily basis. But then what's the alternative? Anna Sarwar, part of that same Pollock Shields clique, part of the same friend circle as the problem at the moment is people are just switching off. They're not engaging, and you see that as people are just getting on with their lives. They just think, I can't be bothered. I'm just gonna go and have a nice day out and go for a meal somewhere. That's it.
Yes. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think that's correct. I do. Did you see any of the national? For those viewers who don't know, there's been a conference held down in London. I think it's a 3 or 4 day conference. It started on Monday. It's calling itself National Conservatives, or the National Conservative Conference or something. Anyway, the two words national and conservative, they put that together, which is unusual these days to see the word national being put forward in a right of centre context.
But what's interesting about it is it's a global event. It's being done in cities and countries around the world. So really? It is actually. So let me actually just I was doing a bit of research into it earlier, and there will be conferences in London, Miami, Brussels, Orlando, Rome, and Washington. So how organic and how grassroots it is, I think, is open to debate. But the way I look at it is, I think the elites, the power brokers, they know that there's anger. They know that these subjects need talked about. But it is the system trying to provide the solution, and the system and those who are part of the system cannot provide that solution. It is only people who are detached, who are not involved, who don't have the selfish naked interest that a lot of these people have. And I mean, I know people might like GB News, but I see GB News as a bit of a safety valve, in that people just at least someone's standing up for me, but nothing's really happening, and that has been in history. Like, what was it Lenin said? He says, well, yes, we'll have an opposition and we'll be the ones that lead it. That's I think, unless people just really have a ruthlessness and clear insight about what needs to happen, and we need fresh blood. You need different voices, and even non-ideological voices. Why does this have to be a new ideology? National conservatism. What does that even mean? Can we not just get back to principles and pragmatism and debate and dialogue, rather than everything having to be based around rigid ideological dogma? Yeah.
No, that's very good. What you're saying is absolutely 100% bang on, and we'll see where this conference, this idea of this national conservatism thing goes, if it goes anywhere, or if it's really just going to be a few books that get put on a shelf and forgotten about, or whether it sparks other people to start to think differently about these sorts of matters. I do think it's interesting that this conference is trying to mainstream the concept of the nation being a good thing.
Anything that opens the Overton window is not a bad. Like, I say that as well about GB News, etc. At least they're furthering the Overton window, like, and putting things out for public conversation. So from that perspective, I'm not against it. I just my experience is that there's a lot of talking and nothing gets done, and all the while the powers that be, just the control grid just keeps growing, and they're the ones that are ruthlessly working behind the scenes to make these changes.
Yeah,
and we're not.
Oh, you're 100% right on that. And just as we wind...
So, Alistair, just very quickly, in relation to Scotland, for example, I remember when they changed the name from the Scottish Executive to the Scottish Government, and they put a big saltire in the middle of it. I remember that, 2007, 2008, and I said to Annabel Goldie at the time, I said, look, why are you supporting this? Because the Tories voted for the SNP budget at the time. I said, You're basically making people's mindset is becoming a quasi-independent country, and they were just like, oh well, we need to get the budget through, because if we don't get the budget through, then blah blah blah. They don't understand the optics of it, and you know that, Alistair. So much of that came from the Scottish government, the First Minister, the Health Secretary. They then had a cabinet.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Well, as I quoted before you came on, I quoted Alex Salmond on this very matter, and the importance of politicians who understand symbolism in order to command the present and control the future, I think is how he put it.
Yeah, but at least as long as the budget got through, Alistair, that's all. That's the Tory one. I was listening to that as well. Like, as long as the GDP keeps growing by 0.1%, then we'll be fine. We'll destroy the entire country, but at least we had economic growth for the last 3 years. Yes.
Well, listen, David, people need to support alternative voices, because that's something that everybody can do. And you're at unitynewsnetwork.co.uk. That's your website, and you've also got your your regular programs, which are on dlive.tv/Unity News, and these are really, really good. And your Twitter is Unity News Net, as is your Facebook is Unity News Network.
And Telegram as well. If people go to the website and they go, and there's all the social media links, go there and please just follow us there and listen to what we have to say, and follow us on all the social media channels, and you will get a genuine analysis of what is happening in geopolitics, and
absolutely,
and non-emotional. I mean, obviously there's always emotion, but so much of the modern media is to provoke an emotional response in people. It's very disingenuous. I mean, they did it over COVID, and they've done it over Ukraine. They didn't used to do this, but they realised that if they pump emotion into people, they pump that in, people will really then get behind the official regime position. So sometimes you do have to take a cold, dispassionate look at things as well, which we try and do.
Absolutely, and people will learn more from your programmes. Some of them they might be a little bit shocked by, but they need to be in that sense, because you won't hear it from the national mainstream media.
I often say as well, what we're doing at UNN is we are waterboarding the public. We're putting them over a bench and a towel over their face and pouring water. We're waterboarding them with the truth, Alistair, in a metaphorical sense.
Yes, well, goodness knows some people do need that that wake-up call. David, it's been fantastic speaking
Brilliant,
to you.
Alistair.
As always,
absolute
wish
pleasure.
we could have you on every night, but you're on
my pleasure.
Your own show every night, which is
it's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Alistair. Good man.
Okay, we'll speak again. Take care.
Bye, Alistair. Bye-bye.
Good night. Fantastic. David Clews, always very entertaining and professional. Love having the guy on. Harry says, good talk. Christopher says, great analysis, David, and all too prophetic, I fear, unless we get better leaders and better resolve. Arnie says, thanks to the Emperor, David Clews. Stuart says, great guest. Catherine says, magnificent. This is an important book. We're now selling this at a lot cheaper due to some new stock that's come in. Scotland Now, a warning to the world, by Professor Tom Gallagher. We've got 4 remaining signed copies by the author himself, and this is only $8.49 at our shop. Let's put the shop link up here. Well worth having, only $8.49, and we'll send you that along with a complimentary copy of Union Heart as well. And please do check out our shop for lots of things, including, for example, there's a link to where you can get this t-shirt. Go to our shop. There we go. Go to our shop, and there's a link where you can pick that up. Because, folks, it's the merchandise that keeps this show on the road, and without the sales that we make, everything would end, and there would be one less program on a Wednesday. That's for sure. So let's get the sales in, folks. Good stuff. Okay, we'll be back next week. We've got another guest next week, I'm pleased to say, a very interesting one. And we'll see you then. We'll see you then. So folks, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.